Tariffs and supply chains, what's true and what's not. Introduction. In recent years, tariffs have emerged as a significant force reshaping global supply chains, sparking debates about their economic impacts, strategic implications, and duration. The claim that supply chain issues are temporary has been frequently cited, particularly in the context of tariff-related disruptions. However, this assertion oversimplifies the complex and often persistent effects of tariffs on global trade networks. This article delves into the multifaceted relationship between tariffs and supply chains, examining what is true, debunking myths, and explaining why disruptions may persist far beyond initial expectations. Drawing on recent analyses, expert insights, and industry trends, we aim to provide a comprehensive understanding of this critical issue. Understanding tariffs and supply chains. What are tariffs? Tariffs are taxes imposed by governments on imported or exported goods. They are typically used to protect domestic industries, raise government revenue, or address trade imbalances. In 2025, tariffs have gained prominence due to policies like those introduced by the Trump administration, which imposed duties as high as 145% on Chinese imports, 25% on Canadian and Mexican goods, and 10% baseline tariffs on nearly all imports to the United States. These measures aim to bolster domestic manufacturing but have far-reaching consequences for global supply chains. The anatomy of a supply chain. A supply chain encompasses the entire process of producing and delivering goods, from raw material extraction to final consumption. It involves multiple stages, including sourcing, manufacturing, logistics, and retail, with each stage relying on a network of suppliers, manufacturers, and distributors across different countries. For example, a car's supply chain might involve steel from Australia, electronic components from Taiwan, and assembly in Mexico before reaching U.S. consumers. Tariffs disrupt this intricate ecosystem by increasing costs, altering sourcing decisions, and complicating logistics. The claim, supply chain issues are temporary. The notion that supply chain disruptions caused by tariffs are temporary stems from historical observations where markets eventually adapted to trade barriers. For instance, a 2019 Congressional Budget Office (CBO) report noted that price effects from the 2018 tariffs stabilized within 2 years as supply chains adjusted. Proponents of this view argue that businesses can mitigate tariff impacts through strategies like reshoring, nearshoring, or diversifying suppliers, suggesting that disruptions are short-lived and manageable. However, this perspective overlooks the structural and systemic challenges that make tariff-related disruptions more persistent. As noted by @econburger on X, supply chains adjusting is a negative effect, and a durable one. The process of reconfiguring supply chains is costly, time-consuming, and fraught with uncertainties, leading to long-term consequences that extend beyond initial disruptions. Why tariffs cause persistent supply chain disruptions? 1. Increased costs and financial strain. Tariffs directly increase the cost of imported goods, affecting raw materials, intermediate components, and finished products. For example, a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum in March 2025 forced manufacturers to either source domestically at higher costs or invest heavily in reconfiguring production to comply with melted and poured requirements. These cost increases ripple through the supply chain, squeezing profit margins and raising consumer prices. Case study: automotive industry. The automotive sector, with its complex global supply chains, is particularly vulnerable. A 25% tariff on vehicles and parts from Canada and Mexico disrupted North American supply chains, leading companies like Stellantis to temporarily shutter factories and lay off 900 U.S. workers due to operational uncertainty. These disruptions are not easily resolved, as reconfiguring supply chains involves significant capital investment and time. Consumer impact. Higher costs are often passed on to consumers, reducing purchasing power. In 2024, consumer prices in electronics and apparel rose by 3.5% due to tariff-related cost increases. This inflationary pressure can dampen demand, further complicating supply chain planning. 2. Supply chain complexity and reconfiguration challenges. Global supply chains are highly intricate, with components often crossing borders multiple times during production. Tariffs disrupt these established networks, forcing companies to seek alternative suppliers or relocate production. However, this process is neither quick nor straightforward. Sourcing challenges. Shifting suppliers to tariff-free regions, such as Vietnam or India, requires vetting new partners, ensuring quality standards, and navigating different regulatory environments. For instance, while Chinese manufacturers have invested in Vietnam to circumvent U.S. tariffs, these countries lack China's scale, infrastructure, and labor specialization, leading to capacity constraints and quality control issues. Logistical bottlenecks. Tariff-induced shifts in sourcing can overwhelm logistics networks. For example, increased demand for shipping from non-tariff countries like Vietnam has led to port congestion and trucking delays, with global shipping costs rising by 12% in 2025. These bottlenecks persist as logistics providers struggle to adapt to new trade patterns. Time and cost of reconfiguration. Reconfiguring supply chains is a massive undertaking that can take years. As Vidya Mani from the University of Virginia noted, changing the supply chain in response to high tariffs is a massive undertaking and lasts beyond any one administration. The time required to establish new supplier relationships, build factories, or optimize logistics networks ensures that disruptions linger. Demand and inventory volatility. Tariffs create sudden shifts in supply and demand, leading to inventory volatility that disrupts supply chain stability. Order cancellations and stockpiling. In anticipation of tariffs, companies often stockpile goods, leading to temporary gluts and increased warehousing costs. For example, retailers piled up inventory before the 2025 tariffs and the removal of the de minimis rule, which allowed duty-free imports of low-value goods from China. However, once tariffs take effect, order cancellations become common, as seen in the 89% of respondents in a CNBC survey reporting canceled orders due to Trump's tariffs. This volatility makes demand forecasting difficult, leading to either excess inventory or shortages. Impact on just-in-time models. Just-in-time (JIT) inventory models, which rely on precise timing to minimize stock, are particularly vulnerable to tariff-induced instability. As Brian Wenk of Flat World Global Solutions noted, tariffs disrupt the accuracy of demand forecasting, forcing companies to pause or cancel orders, which undermines JIT efficiency. 4. Geopolitical and retaliatory risks. Tariffs often trigger retaliatory measures from trading partners, further complicating supply chains. For example, China's high tariffs on U.S. vehicles, up to 40%, and potential retaliatory tariffs in response to U.S. actions create a tit-for-tat escalation that destabilizes global trade. These retaliatory measures can restrict U.S. exporters' access to foreign markets, reducing revenues and complicating supply chain planning. Geopolitical tensions. Geopolitical events, such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine or Middle East conflicts, exacerbate tariff-related disruptions by affecting commodity supplies like oil and critical minerals. These events create a volatile environment where supply chains must navigate multiple simultaneous risks. 5. Regulatory and compliance burdens. Tariffs introduce new regulatory requirements, such as updated customs documentation in compliance with trade agreements like the USMCA. Failure to meet these requirements can result in penalties, with a 2025 PwC report noting that 25% of global companies faced tariff-related fines in 2024 due to inadequate customs processes. These compliance challenges add costs and delays, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, with limited resources. Example, UK supply chains. UK procurement teams exporting to the US must navigate complex tariff codes and documentation, risking delays and penalties if misclassified. A UK clothing brand reduced import duties by 5% through tariff engineering but required significant expertise to achieve this. 6. Long-term strategic shifts. While some disruptions may stabilize over time, tariffs often force permanent changes in supply chain strategies, contradicting the notion of temporary issues. Nearshoring and reshoring. Companies are increasingly nearshoring, e.g., to Mexico or Vietnam, or reshoring, to the U.S. to reduce tariff exposure. However, a CNBC survey found that reshoring could double costs for 47% of respondents, making it unfeasible for many. Nearshoring also faces challenges, as alternative regions lack the infrastructure to match China's capabilities. Regional trade blocs. Tariffs encourage the formation of regional trade blocs, altering global trade dynamics. For example, the USMCA, up for review in 2026, may influence sourcing decisions, but high tariffs on Mexico could limit its benefits. These shifts require long-term investments and restructuring, extending disruption timelines. 7. Industry-specific impacts. Certain industries face disproportionate challenges, amplifying the persistence of disruptions. Electronics. The electronics industry, reliant on Chinese components, faces significant cost increases from 25% tariffs. Apple, for instance, has accelerated efforts to diversify its supply chain, but transitions to Vietnam and Bangladesh are slow and costly. Automotive. The automotive sector's complex supply chains, with parts crossing borders multiple times, are disrupted by tariffs on vehicles and components. This leads to production delays and higher costs, as seen with Stellantis factory closures. Retail. Retailers face broad exposure due to diverse product mixes, requiring case-by-case sourcing decisions. The National Retail Federation warned of potential shortages and price hikes as cargo volumes decline due to cancelled orders. Toys. A 2025 Toy Association survey found that nearly half of U.S. toy companies could go out of business if tariffs persist, highlighting the severe impact on import-reliant sectors. Debunking myths: what's true and what's not. Tariffs always bring manufacturing back to the U.S. What's true: tariffs aim to incentivize domestic manufacturing, but the reality is more complex. A CNBC survey found that 57% of respondents cited cost as the biggest barrier to reshoring, with 47% estimating that it would more than double costs. Instead, companies are more likely to relocate to low-tariff countries like Vietnam or India, bypassing the U.S. altogether. What's not: the assumption that tariffs will lead to a U.S. manufacturing boom ignores the high costs and infrastructure limitations of reshoring. Most companies opt for cost-effective alternatives abroad, as seen with Chinese manufacturers investing in Vietnam. Supply chain disruptions are short-lived. What's true: while some price effects may stabilize within 2 years, as per the CBO's 2024 report, the process of supply chain adjustment is itself a disruption. Reconfiguring supplier networks, building new facilities, and adapting logistics take years and involve significant costs. What's not? The belief that disruptions are temporary overlooks the long-term strategic shifts required, such as nearshoring or diversifying suppliers, which can take decades to fully implement. Consumers won't bear the costs. What's true: tariffs increase costs that are often passed on to consumers. For example, a smartphone manufacturer facing a 25% tariff on Chinese components may raise prices, contributing to a 3.5% rise in electronics prices in 2024. What's not? Claims that tariffs won't affect consumer prices, as suggested by some policymakers, are misleading. Economists agree that tariffs lead to higher prices, as companies cannot fully absorb cost increases. Tariffs only affect targeted countries. What's true: tariffs have global ripple effects, disrupting supply chains beyond targeted countries. For instance, UK supply chains are affected by US tariffs due to reliance on the US as an export market. Retaliatory tariffs further amplify these effects. What's not? The idea that tariffs are confined to specific countries ignores the interconnected nature of global supply chains, where disruptions in one region impact others. Strategies to mitigate persistent disruptions. To navigate the persistent disruptions caused by tariffs, businesses can adopt several strategies. Supplier diversification. Diversifying supplier bases reduces reliance on tariff-impacted regions. Companies should evaluate alternative suppliers in countries like Vietnam or India, balancing cost, quality, and reliability. Scenario planning and predictive analytics. AI-driven tools can model tariff impacts on costs, inventory, and lead times. Kinaxis reported a surge in scenario modeling on its Maestro platform as companies prepared for 2025 tariffs. Real-time visibility. End-to-end visibility into demand, inventory, and logistics enables rapid adaptation. Advanced inventory management systems provide centralized views of stock across locations. Tariff engineering. Reclassifying products under less impacted tariff codes can reduce duties, as demonstrated by a UK clothing brand that saved 5% on import duties. Nearshoring and reshoring. While costly, nearshoring to Mexico or reshoring to the US can reduce tariff exposure. Companies must conduct cost-benefit analyses to determine feasibility. Engaging with policymakers. Collaborating with industry groups to advocate for exemptions or adjustments can mitigate impacts, as suggested by Ryan Jacobs of Jacobs Investment Management. The role of technology in building resilience. Technology plays a critical role in mitigating tariff-related disruptions. AI and advanced analytics enable scenario planning, demand forecasting, and risk assessment. For example, Project 44 uses data to anticipate delays and bottlenecks, helping businesses navigate tariff uncertainty. Cloud-based supply chain platforms provide real-time visibility, allowing companies to adjust to changing trade policies. Investments in digital supply chains, as seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, have proven effective in enhancing resilience. Sustainability opportunities. Interestingly, tariffs may drive sustainability by encouraging nearshoring, which reduces shipping distances and emissions. A 2025 MIT supply chain study found that nearshoring cut logistics-related emissions by 10% for some firms. However, these benefits are tempered by interim disruptions as companies navigate capacity constraints. Conclusion. The claim that supply chain issues are temporary underestimates the profound and lasting impacts of tariffs on global trade. Increased costs, supply chain complexity, demand volatility, geopolitical risks, regulatory burdens, and industry-specific challenges ensure that disruptions persist far beyond initial expectations. While businesses can mitigate these effects through diversification, technology, and strategic planning, the process is costly and time-consuming, often requiring years to fully implement. By debunking myths and understanding the true scope of tariff impacts, companies can better prepare for a volatile trade landscape. As tariffs continue to reshape global supply chains in 2025, resilience and agility will be key to thriving in this new era of trade policy.